Good afternoon. My name is Tim McGinty. I'm the Cuyahoga County Prosecutor running for re-election. And I want to thank all four of you for taking the time out of your busy lives to be this involved with the community and doing this important work. I've dealt with the Citizens League now since I was first elected in 1992, and I always run into very dedicated, knowledgeable people that care about the community, and I'm very impressed. And you perform great public service and giving your impressions to the public who naturally doesn't have the time to vet each candidate and the issues there. So thank you very much. You obviously care a lot to do this. And I'm always impressed with the great questions and knowledge you have on the issues. And when I was a judge, it was true, and I know it's true this time because I went through this vetting once before. So to tell you a little bit about myself, I know I met Mr. Dietrich before, and I've been a public servant since 1973. I went right out of college, right into the court as a probation officer, and I finished college in December 1972 and started in April of 1973 as a probation officer. I coached football and at the same time, and went to law school and graduated and went immediately to the prosecutor's office after I passed the bar. I took the bar and passed in 1981. Joined the prosecutor's office early 1982, and I stayed here 10 years. I ran for judge in 1992. I was elected. I was a judge almost 19 years. Resigned as required to run for the county prosecutor's office. Started the county prosecutor's office October 1st, 2012. I came in on the opportunity to continue the reform effort I have and to make some changes that I thought were very important to our community. We had, if we all recall, and I'm happy we met, most of us have forgotten, but we were in a very traumatic moment in our county's history. We had just undergone a terrible corruption issue, and it had besmirched and demeaned the community with DeMora, Russo, and the various people who were involved in that. And I was upset by that. I was upset that public corruption was allowed to fester and grow, and that it was preventable. It was preventable, and it wasn't safe. And it was right there. And it caused tremendous harm. I am happy that as a community we recovered in these past half dozen years or so since that initial raid by the FBI of national fame, that we haven't taken on the weight of the reputation as we had, it looked like at the beginning, of the Youngstown or some other Mahoney County reputations, which were very damaging to business, to morale, and the community. And so I wanted to step in and see that it didn't recur. And I thought I could do that. I also wanted to continue the reform effort I started in 2005. In 2003 and 2004, I began the justice system reform movement after some debacles in our system where people were killed unnecessarily, victims who should have been alive. They had their killers' cases been processed properly. They slipped through the system, followed in many cracks in the system. The police would straight release individuals, so I took on a straight release issue in 1999. It took till probably 2003 to have them stop straight releasing people. Remember outside the window here, the old Bond Court building, there was a lady killed in 1999, Susan Locke, and she was working late in the business office there, and it caused a lot of infamy. No one knew who did it. We eventually found out it was a guy named Victor Washington who had been straight released 3 times, and there were other opportunities to put him in prison, much like the Anthony Sowell case. So for 10 years I've worked on I formed the reform movement, the JSR. I brought in with the help of the commissioners, over the course of my own course objection, they weren't anxious for it, Justice Management Institute. They gave us advice. They thoroughly examined our system and said they made 41 recommendations, and they said we could improve the quality of the justice we deliver. and I worked on that since. I thought I could do better as a prosecutor, get more done. And particularly from the prosecutor's side, I could work the prosecutor's side and the police side even harder. The other addition to that was the Anthony Sowell case as an impetus to run. Anthony Sowell killed 11 women on Imperial Avenue, and there were a number of opportunities I saw as a judge and as an active member in this JSR program. It could have been stopped earlier. It should have been stopped earlier, and it shouldn't have gone on. So I have taken these issues up. I have made promises, and I've kept the promises. I took politics out of the prosecutor's office. My predecessor was my opponent and predecessor. He was the first assistant in charge. Ran a political machine. It was a virtual patronage machine. It was well documented by the plain dealer and others. And it was an old-fashioned way of doing politics. And I understand it. It was acceptable behavior at one time, but it wasn't efficient management. It wasn't good stewardship and management of the office. When I came in, I depoliticized it by saying that we are no longer having award leaders. We are no longer running for office. If you're an assistant prosecutor, you cannot be the award leader. You cannot be the council person. You cannot run for office against the judges. We're not running politics out of the office. My goal was to make it a professional, more professional office, aiming at the example of the U.S. Attorney's Office, where politics are kept out and don't interfere. The reputation of the office was such that, although it was a good office, that in many ways that you weren't quite sure whether the decision had a political aspect to it in each decision made. I then went in, removed the politics out, gave everybody a chance to stay or leave, and if they assured us they were going to stay out of politics, finish their term or whatever office they've been elected in, they could remain or make a choice of having a political career. I have no problem with political careers. They're honorable, they're good. It's just the two don't mix well, and they haven't mixed well in the past. And I thought this would be a better way to run an office, and we did that. So we took the politics out. When you run a political machine, you miss things. And DeMora, Russo, the engineer's office, and the other points of corruption ran similar political machines. They had relatives, they had friends, they had the award leaders, they had the politics in the middle. And when you have that, that's the first step towards patronage, and these other things are the first step towards corruption. That's been my theory in 40 years of public service, and the two tie together. So we removed that. We removed that opportunity. And the old prosecutor's office, well-intended as they were, they did not strike any fear into DeMora Russo family operated. I mean, the virtual family tree every day was a family reunion, and because the patronage of the politics, because they weren't in fear of being scrutinized for that, because they knew the same thing was going on at the prosecutor's office. We don't do that. We scrutinize everything. We scrutinize the contracts. We try to keep politics out as much as practically possible. And I think we've had some success there. We are working to achieve the goals of the reform that we started originally in 2005 and aiming high. We are aiming to reduce the number of individuals charged, not increase. The high point approximately 8 years ago was 18,500 indictments. We're down to just over 10,000, 10,391 in 2015. We are aiming down. We want to indict less, rehabilitate more, and then, because we want to eliminate the low-level individuals from the system quickly, we want to get them into rehabilitation, diversion, drug court, specialty courts, mental health court, which takes a surprisingly high number and needs more room. We've got great courts to do that in the drug and mental health courts. We want to divert more, and we've diverted. We're close to 50%. We're in the 40s. We're 44, 45 at last glance, more than had been done before. We are then focusing, and we're encouraging all these low-level diversions. We're encouraging early assignment of counsel, which has been a huge fight, getting them attorneys early so they can be recognized. Before, and I'm talking before the reform started in 2005, And the previous prosecutor was a supporter of the reform in these efforts, and he was, Bill Mason was instrumental in many of them, and did a good job in some of them, and we appreciated it. And was to get the assigned counsel early, very early. The earlier they're assigned counsel, the sooner we can do justice. We can't do anything until they're assigned counsel. Nothing can happen until they have an attorney. Nothing good can happen.
Apologize for the interruption, but we
Sure.
have hit 10 minutes and we would like to have time for our questions.
Go ahead.
My guess is some of the things left on your list we'll still get to talk about.
Sure.
So why don't we start as we did with Ron, and then go ahead.
Okay. Prosecutor McGinty, I have a two-part question.
Sure.
The first part is driving in today, I heard more about the heroin problem that we're having all over the country.
Yes.
And my question is, what can the prosecutor's office do to tamp that down or close it off somewhere?
The heroin issue, Ron, is the most difficult issue we face. More people are dying of heroin than the homicides. And it's very quiet because we've made some splashes with interviews and headlines, and with the medical examiner, Dr. Kelson, who's very concerned with this also, and the police, who are also very concerned. But it climbed like a slope you'd see at the ski resort, and now it's flattened out somewhat. I would like to think we could take credit for it, but it's really probably Narcan, the drug, which has flattened it out. It is an awful problem. This is directly from the Mexican cartel. We're not able to stop their sources very well. The flow is in, so we are doing our best to prosecute vigorously. I was a very active participant in taking down with a task force of collaborating with various law enforcement agencies, the biggest heroin dealer on the southeast side of Cleveland recently. And he's indicted in jail and for a variety of charges. But we are not going to out-arrest this problem. It's education. So we're putting equal amount of effort into education. We're spending over $100,000 a year on education programs, on films, websites we put up. We're distributing films, not only in Cuyahoga County to the schools, but across the state. We're sharing them with other prosecutors' offices, other cities, other health departments. Right now, our latest film is educating families how to see the signs of heroin addiction as their son or daughter hiding. It is a problem we haven't conquered. We are working on it vigorously. Joe Froelich, a former writer with the Plain Dealer, is in charge of the education side, and the prosecutors that handle the drug section are on the other side. We are charging people who sell drugs with manslaughter if the recipient dies. That has caused some discouragement and hopefully deterrent. There's a number of cases we've been able to bring these charges. It is very difficult. The Cleveland police are understaffed, but this is equally happening in the suburbs. It's basically 50-50 or slight majority suburbanite problem. The problem is moved. The answer is education, interdiction at the border, and the large suppliers are secondary. I have to admit the education is the greater work here.
The second part is, I was reading an article about this synthetic drug called $5 Insanity or Fleck, and apparently in Florida it's a giant problem down there. And the article says that a grand jury was prompted to call for a special law to fight the scourge and attracting several far-reaching American investigations. Has your office seen that? Is there any plans to try to address those?
Well, we've seen a number of new drugs and new ways to abuse and circumvent the system come in. As they come in, we need to keep addressing the legislation, and the legislature in Ohio has been pretty good at it. We have even a bigger drug problem with synthetic drugs in southern Ohio than we do at the North Coast here. As bad as we have it, they have it worse in the Appalachians and in other areas. So they are on top of it. Attorney General DeWine has been very active in legislation and enforcement. And I'm sure they will soon have it. They have that in Ohio. I haven't seen it yet, but certainly in this region I haven't seen it. But it'll be coming if it is a popular drug. it is, people are taking advantage of people's addictions, and it's a scourge, really. When I started the probation officer 40, I guess almost 43 years ago, you know, heroin was the problem. It was a terrible problem. It's resurfaced. It's as bad now as it was then. It causes a lot of crime, a lot of heartache, and a lot of loss of life and families. And it often is begun by just, in a great number of these cases, people start out with an injury, they get prescription drugs, they become addicted to the prescription drugs, and the illegal prescription drugs are so expensive they go to the alternative, which is very low priced in heroin, and sometimes with fentanyl, and they use it at $5 a crack instead of $75 a hit. It's much more powerful, and they're hopelessly addicted.
Are there enough treatment facilities for the people that come in to the system as using?
No, there's a vast shortage of treatment facilities. There's been some expansion of the solid ones we have from Rosary Hall to the treatment programs around, but we are very short in treatment facilities, very short in treatment money and opportunity for these people.
What can the drug courts or the prosecutor's office do about that?
Well, the sooner it was taking, when the Justice Reform Program started, it was taking many months to get to the first real meaningful pretrial, to get an attorney. The indictment took at least 3 months on average. You're in the 4th month before you get there. So if you begun a heroin addiction, the chance to intervene early is lost if you're really getting into probation or treatment 6 or 7 months later. We want to get the intervention right now. When you come in, when they're in remorse or in mood, and early in their stages of addiction, to get them into a program and give them positive incentives. So you could if you go into a drug treatment program or other diversions or treatment in lieu, the incentive is the case goes away, and it's your first or second case. It's a great incentive to do that if you complete the treatment. Now they'll fall on and off the wagon. That's part of the treatment. If they complete that, then you have a much higher chance of rehabilitating than you would if it took place later, 6 months later.
There's a topic that I think might end up being the one that defines not just this campaign, but your service as prosecutor, and that's the Tamir Rice grand jury's operation. I was wondering if you could explain why it was that grand jury was set up as an investigative grand jury rather than a standard grand jury.
When I came into office, and when I campaigned 4 years ago, I said that all use of deadly force cases would go to a grand jury for grand jury review and a grand jury investigation, whether it be a long or a short one. They're all grand jury investigations. And that's simply a review where a detective would come in and say, I talked to 10 witnesses, and this is what they told me, and this is why we're asking for the drug charge. In an investigative grand jury, the jury actually hears from the 10 or 20 or 40 witnesses and makes a determination. I followed the model of Franklin County, Columbus, Ohio, who's had this model for 35 years. That they take all use of deadly force cases where a police officer kills a civilian to the grand jury for review and investigation. Ron O'Brien, the current prosecutor, and Mike Miller, the prosecutor before that, who started instituted.
Welcome to the Cleveland Public Library. We'd like to invite everyone to join us today as we celebrate African American History Month with 2 special programs. Today at 2 p.m. in our main library building on the 3rd floor, the job messengers will be bringing their reggae roots music from Jamaica to give voice to the oppressed and unite the world through rhythm and song. At 3 p.m. in our Livingstone Swing Auditorium, please join us.
Sorry about that interruption.
No problem. You were asking about defining cases of my office during the years I've been there since 2012. First we had Castro, then we had Brelo, and then Chase and Shoot, and Acevedo, and a number of others. And now the one on everyone's mind, of course, is the tragedy with Tamir Rice being killed, 12-year-old little boy at the rec center at Goodell and West Boulevard. So I said, now we've had 20 use of force cases assigned to us since I started. We average one every other month. Every one goes to the grand jury. Every one is reviewed. And every one we issue a public report. That's our policy. We want the public to know what happened. Unlike you saw Chicago and Ferguson. In Chicago, they didn't release the film, they didn't release the report, and when the shooting came, it was quite a surprise to the public. We put the truth out there so that right away, not years later, or a year or so later, as in Chicago, or in Ferguson, we put out right away what the facts are as soon as we can get a report. We are shooting from an independent agency other than the agency for which the police shooter worked to do the reports. And we've been successful in most cases obtaining it. So in Cleveland cases, where the majority of the use of deadly force cases come from, the sheriff's office is now conducting an independent investigation. The conclusion of their investigation is made public and all the reports that go with it. Then we take it to a grand jury who does not just reviewing reports, which would be what a standard grand jury does. They do an investigation where they bring in the actual witnesses. And we had 2 use of force deaths in 3 days in December. Same thing will happen there, but they were on film. They were on body cams and or dash cams. So I expect to be much shorter investigations. And what they're, at first glance, much clearer cases, what occurred. So we take every case to the grand jury reviews it, they get all the experts they want, the grand jury asks questions. There's 9 voting members, 12 members in the room, takes 7 of 9 to make a decision. They, after hearing all the evidence, hearing all the witnesses they want to hear from, doing their own examination of the witnesses, they vote first on whether it's a justified shooting, and if not, they're given the charges, or they're given the charges in advance as what's available. That's what they did in the Brelo case. They reached verdicts of manslaughter and other counts. There's 5 counts against other supervisors, and the grand jury in the Tamir Rice case reached a conclusion that no charges were warranted by the law.
Can you explain why the expert reports from that case were made public, if that's typical?
For the same reason I did it in the Brelo case, that it's part of the grand jury, it's part of the open investigation on the case. When I referred to cases in Brelo, or when I referred to cases in the Tamir Rice case, we chose 3 experts, 3 neutral, nationally known experts. One, Mr. Caceres, who was the same expert who testified in the Brelo case that Officer Brelo was at fault and had committed manslaughter, to review those cases. He had reviewed cases and testified for and against police officers in Ohio in the past, including a rather highly publicized case out of Toledo. So he's a very respected expert. Then we went to the expert from the FBI, who teaches at the FBI Academy, who actually teaches use of deadly force. She has never testified as an expert before, but she's clearly an expert in the field. We asked her to opine, and Mr. Lamar Sims, a well-known, highly respected prosecutor who prosecutes these cases in Denver, Colorado, a jurisdiction known for its advancement in best practices. All 3 were given the reports, the assignment independently. They reviewed the facts and made recommendations. We put those as part of the sheriff's investigation, including the highway patrol, medical examiners, experts, forensic experts, toxicology, and photo experts. We also took experts from who took the original photos, were able to improve, enhance them, and make more sense of them. And audio experts regarding procedures with the dispatch and the errors that took place there. We did not go into the errors of reports on the errors of the hiring that took place or other issues because they weren't relevant to our inquiry. They'd be relevant to a civil inquiry, very relevant, but not ours.
From the experience we've seen with all this, at any point would you look, if you had a choice or a suggestion to make changes in the present grand jury process, have you any?
Yes, and I have proposed one to the Ohio legislature, and it's been publicized, that it become law that an independent agency in the shooting cases, use of deadly force cases, do the investigation rather than the shooting agency itself. That eliminates the garrity problems, which is a legal issue that takes place at the scene when the officer is interviewed, and it gives a sense of independence regarding the investigation. Secondly, I propose that the Ohio Attorney General Office have an overview responsibility, that they overview all 88 counties. And should a local county prosecutor not present the case to the grand jury, then the Attorney General can and should, if he thinks it's, or she thinks it's advisable. So they have an oversight on all 88 counties. They have an overview responsibility. And just like in organized crime cases, they could go into the grand jury themselves, the Attorney General's office. I propose an exception to the rule as to access to the grand jury.
There's been public opinion that the amount of time it took for you to finish that was extensive, something 12 months. Can you explain why and what you do to change that, to minimize that time?
It actually took 13. I'm sorry to say, but we aimed for 90 after we received a report. We received a report in the summer in June, and we got the experts assigned and waiting for a number of reports. When we began presenting it at the end of September, probably early October, it took longer than we expected. The defense asked to present experts too and their own witnesses, and we allowed that. Part of our policy is that, and it's always been my policy when you're presenting a case for the grand jury corruption or not, if an individual charged or accused wants to come to the grand jury, we certainly let them. Or if they have evidence, we let them. If they have an alibi, if they have some other explanation they want to give, we present that to the grand jury. That dragged the case out. We expected a result before Thanksgiving, and before Thanksgiving, and it took us to the end of December. And taking a year in these cases is not unusual. As you see in these other cases across the country, in the complex cases, take a while. And we just got this new system started out with the sheriff, so that took a while too. But in the future, we plan to have them done faster, and we're shooting for that. Yes, sir?
I'm sorry. Do you think that the prosecutor's office or the media or some other organization could do a better job of explaining to the public the role of the grand jury as opposed to a
we
regular
should, and
jury?
you're right, and we've tried. And we're going to try harder. We put up on our website letters. We visited the various TV stations to talk to them about what the grand jury process is. It's a very complex process that the general public isn't familiar with. Most people aren't familiar with the constitutional provisions regarding the grand jury proceedings and what it's there to protect. So there is an education issue there, and we tried, and we're going to keep trying to do a better job.
Does your office do much public outreach to the community?
Yeah, we have done outreach. We do outreach all the time. We have each district of all the cities in the county divided into 5 districts. We have all the assistant prosecutors have some responsibility to stay in touch with the community, do the outreach, talk to the groups, be at the groups, be between the governmental agencies and the mayors of the council to the crime groups, victim groups, active, whatever the issue is at the time. Stay active within their region. Each has an assignment, and they're doing very well.
Sure, we all assume that prevention would be the best way to control drug abuse. How do you feel about approaching it at a smaller level, for example, at an elementary or a middle grade school level? Has the prosecution involved anything like that, or do you have plans?
We have. The office has traditionally been, for the last dozen years, involved at the lower level with the ICAC unit, the Internet Crime Against Children. and teaching the children in junior high school and at that level in particular and above and some below about sexual violence, abuse, and the dangers there. We have done outreach with drugs. We are trying this education. Many of our programs and the films that we are creating and using professional agencies to do it are aimed at the would-be user. So from that first heroin injection.
The issue of justice system reform was in yesterday's paper. You might have seen the editorial from the Plain Dealer, and there was really two things that stood out in my mind. One is that there's now a three-part process, one led by the executive, one by your office, and the other by the judges themselves. And there's also a reference to the judges having felt bullied by you in this process. Can you respond to that?
Well, bullied was from another article, I think, but they've said their term, no doubt about it. We do, and it's unfortunate. We were on one page when I started this in 2005 with justice system reform. We had some major failures in our system. The Outside Best Practices Institute, the Justice Management Group came in, made recommendations. We were working well together for a number of years, and it finally came down to a crunch exactly 3 years ago on St. Valentine's Day, 2013. Are we going to produce statistics, performance measures or not? The court was resistant. The court did not want performance measures. We wanted performance measures and goals, and we eventually obtained a unanimous vote to have these performance measures instituted. And the executive at the time was Fitzgerald. We began the process. The court did not wish to participate. The court wanted to do their own statistics. They said they were going to do the core tools only, which we were fine with, and which is great. It's a set of tools and measurements by the National Center for State Courts, which we work with, and we have reports from, and we're certainly willing to use those and the other measurements. Measurements such as average age of felony case, average age of disposition, percentages in our jail, how long it takes to process a case, how many get diverted, how long does it take to get to the grand jury. That's entirely the prosecutor or police. How long does it take to get to the end of the case, jail cases versus bail cases, levels of cases. Then compare our performance to other better performing cities, see how they perform their best practices, and take it from there. It required things like measurements of each judge, each prosecutor, each defense attorney, how long did their cases take, one of the things with trial date certainty, how often do they set a case or reset a case. And the performance varied, and it affects the average. So we wanted to shoot for high performance, and this is the way the national expert told us to do it, and all of them did it, and the better performing cities across the country and jurisdictions did. So we're taking the best practices that have worked and using them. The court declined to go forward. The court said eventually said they were only going to do the core tools, and they were going to put them right up. That was 3 years ago this month, and only 5 of them are up. And they still haven't put up the other 5. There's 10 more to do. 10 more meaningful. Now there were some problems, and there's a split amongst the judges. I was a judge for 19 years, so I understand it. What the split is. It's a split of opinion, and the opinion now is should they have their own. And I respect their opinion. They think they should have their own reform program. We're fine with that if they do, if they will cooperate with them. I hope they cooperate with us as we continue our reform and with the executive. There is a branch of government issue. They don't think the executive should be telling them what to do or what measures, since the judiciary is an independent view. We understand that. But I am looking really for judicial-led reform movement. Those are the reform movements that have worked in the past the best. Whether it be Maricopa County, Phoenix, Arizona, whether it be LA, or whether it be New York City, Manhattan, and all 5 boroughs actually. They were judicial-led. Those were the most effective. But barring the judiciary, if they don't want to lead this, we will keep attempting to try to conduct this reform and conduct the movement. If you look at my webpage, you'll see a a great deal of statistical analysis. In the past, there was no statistical analysis. There were no performance measures. When I started this, there were basically two, in 1999, 98, 99, they made clearance rate and number of indictments. Now, you'll see hundreds of points of measurement, and we're basically accountable. We want to hold ourselves accountable as prosecutors. We have listed the 100 slowest cases, for instance, to encourage our prosecutors, encourage the courts, encourage the defense attorneys to move those cases. When we measure trial date certainty, if I have a judge who postpones a case for years and years and years, 4.5, 3 years, whatever it might be, over and over, that's very tough on the justice system. It's very tough on the victim. So those are rare judges. Most judges are extremely vigilant, but and precise and dedicated. But some have a hard time with their docket, and we want to encourage performance. If we're part of it, we know it too. We put it on our website who the prosecutor is, and we go to that prosecutor who's on that slowest 100 list and talk to them and work through or heard the problems, whatever they might be. So we want a system where we're all accountable. We want a system where the system works. We are willing to do whatever it takes to get reforms and improvement in the justice system, whether it be movement of the prosecutor, movement of the judges, movement by the executive and council. We're for it all. Some of the, and the plain dealer analyzed that, it's pretty well. It's there's some judges who just don't want the measurement, and they don't want to be accountable to the other agencies, the other branches of government. And I respect it if they want to actually do the reform. We're with them. We'll work with them. And I've told the administrative judge that we're here to help, whatever it takes.
Does anybody want to get a last minute question in as we come close to wrapping up?
Actually, in regards to heroin use, where do you stand?
What use, I'm sorry?
As far as heroin use.
Heroin, okay.
You know, obviously it's happened across the borders. Where do you stand in regards to working with other county prosecutors? What have you been able to maneuver with them to make this a whole move?
I meet monthly. I'm an executive committee of the Ohio Prosecutors Association, and we discuss it often. We work together on legislation, to support legislation, and share the issues that are common. And the heroin issue is a monthly topic, and the other drug abuse. It's even a higher level of crisis in southern Ohio and the other states, in the other part of the state. And we are learning the lessons they have learned on interdiction prevention. And it is a constant sore point in our effort. It is very, very tough. It's very tough on the individuals who work in these programs and go to the body scenes, and these aren't normal crime scenes, death scenes where people die. As in the homicide, those are very sad. These are people who are dying that you didn't expect to die. They weren't drug dealers or hold-up men or whatever. It's very, very sad. It's very, very tough on the family. And each time makes a huge impact, a tidal wave on that family and that community, each death. When I see obits and I see young people, sometimes I just wonder, and I later find out it is someone who died of a heroin overdose. My stomach drops every time I see it. We want to do what we can, and we're doing everything we can. And we're learning lessons from other communities across the country. And what works there, we're trying here.
I mean, there's national attention that's been brought with involvement with the Department of Justice, with the Cleveland Police
Yes.
right now, no question about it. From what's happening, from what's being done, in your opinion, what do you think would be the best move to make it more efficient, what may not, and also what's your involvement in this?
Well, I think I agree with the Mayor Jackson that the DOJ report, investigation, and agreement is a great thing for the city. It will improve the quality of the police performance. It will, in the long run, be a benefit to the city in the short run. in our part, we're doing a lot. We learned from the high-speed chase and shoot the 137 shots at. What we don't have is dash cams. What we don't have in this city is dash cams. I've taken $1 million out of money we've taken from criminals, forfeiture funds that we can spend it for a variety of purposes, and used it. Just $500,000 we put aside for Cleveland is in the process of designing and buying dash cams for all the cars. We're going to pay for all the cars in Cleveland to have a dash cam. Will prevent these problems in the future. We will, and we have matched funds for $250,000 and now almost $500,000 in the, or it will total $500,000 in the suburbs. In Sheriff's Office. We'll know exactly what happened. When the studies have shown a dash cam should have been here years ago. We would have known that chase and shoot would have happened if there were dash cams, frankly. It just wouldn't have happened. It would have violated all the rules in the book, and we would have known exactly what happened from the dash cam. We wouldn't have had the big, long investigation in that one either. That took a long time to do that investigation in that case, and finally bring it to trial. Many delays in that. If we had the dash cams. Studies have shown, because cities have been using these all over the country, that if you have a problematic city, or almost any city, police complaints drop like a rock. It might be 40% or it might be 80%, but it's somewhere high. They drop like a rock. There's more public confidence after dash cams and body cams are put in, and you have less problems. If there's a problematic police officer, over-aggressive or out of control, it soon will appear that police officer will be removed. And those are few and far between. And from a prosecutor's viewpoint, but they're there, and we've seen them. The problems that have happened, you've seen them in Carolina. You saw one perhaps in Chicago. What we'll do is give us a solid evidence. And on your average case, the normal case, not these extreme cases, we will get the evidence of exactly what happened. It's hard to remember sequence when things are happening fast, if shots are being fired back and forth. The cameras will demonstrate it. I could give you many examples. One would be a 4th District Cleveland police case. There was a call for domestic violence. The woman had been beaten up. The police respond. They go there. They ask the man to come out. He opens the door and boom, boom, fires 2 shots, hits the police officer in the chest. The police retreat. They yell and tell him to come down, throw the gun out and come down the steps. Well, he comes down the steps, but he won't throw the gun. They're ordering him to drop the gun. He's got the gun in his side in his hand, and he's yelling profanely to them. And they pled with him for 1 minute and 34 seconds to drop the gun. They begged him to drop the gun. He refused to do it. He raised the gun, and when he raised it into a firing position, they shot and killed him. Now, they all had body cams on. We know exactly what happened. There isn't any question what was said and what happened. It eliminates the issues and eliminates the problem. If there wasn't a body cams, there could have been accusations, lawsuits. You would have the police officer's word. The man wouldn't be there alive, and the landlady who was being threatened, or the domestic violence victim, wasn't present. So you would have other issues. So the body cams and dash cams, Mayor Jackson's put on the body cams. It's a brilliant move. The measuring makes a difference. The Department of Justice is requiring these cities who are under these consent decrees to measure violence, measure orders, measure. You must measure to improve. That's the whole concept of the Justice Reform Program that I began. We never measured in Cuyahoga County. We want to measure. We want to measure performance. We want to set goals, and that's what they're doing there. That's what we're trying to do across the board. Just be accountable. And are we going to be part of the problem? Sure. If we measure, we're part of the problem. Are police part of the problem? Yes, of course. Are the courts part of the problem? Of course. Many courts are run perfectly and efficiently, and some aren't. Many prosecutors run perfectly and efficiently, but some don't. The records and measurements and accountability that results from it will improve performance. We're being transparent, and we're trying to run the criminal justice system like a business rather than a bureaucracy of secrecy. There's a virtual culture of secrecy within our criminal justice system that we are trying to break.
We've gone a little bit over our time, but we'd like to give you, if you could, in a minute or so, if you want to address anything else that we haven't covered today, we'd give you that moment.
Thank you. We have been given a lot of challenges at this prosecutor's office, whether it be the Castro Acevedo case, the Gloria Corner case, which we solved from 1984, a young girl killed on her way to school, death penalty cases. Looking yesterday at the death penalty stats, in 2011, last year, my opponent's office, indicted 85% of the death penalty eligible cases. In fact, their policy was that if you're eligible for the death penalty, you'll be charged with the death penalty. We only charged 4.5% in 2015 in death penalty eligible cases. So we have a 90+% decrease in death penalty cases. We took down the internet cafes, casinos, every one in Cleveland, which were ripping off people. We've had a gang crackdown of significant proportion, from the Heartless Felons to BBEs and a half dozen other gangs. We've cut down the violence in a very serious problem. We've worked well cooperated with the police and other agencies and the FBI. We won an important landmark case to protect children at the U.S. Supreme Court, Ohio versus Darius Clark, which we haven't had a victory like that since 1968 in Cuyahoga County. And won at 9-0 in protecting children, and it'll protect them in all 5,000 counties of the country, not just this one. We have started a human trafficking program, and we have the majority of the human trafficking convictions in Ohio, of all the 88 counties. We begin an organized crime task force, and we are tackling serious organized crime. We have a massive juvenile justice reform led by Dwayne Deskins, my first assistant, who replaced my opponent, an African-American male who's done an outstanding job as a first assistant in charge and leading the reform movement, in particular at the juvenile justice unit. And we begun a conviction integrity unit, which has made some important strides in recognizing that mistakes can happen in criminal justice, and we want to own up to them and move towards them. We've reorganized and began a family law division, where we're strengthening families with the family services unit and child support unit. We have torn down hundreds of homes, spent $2.3 million in a different manner. With DTAC money, foreclosure money, we are knocking homes down in targeted areas. We're choosing targeted areas, knocking down all the homes rather than spreading across the whole county, in the effort that we can create foreclosure-free zones where the prices of homes can stabilize, adjoining partners can invest. These two we did, their hospitals, their clinic, and the metro hospitals. We've also joined to help other existing success programs like Slavic Village and tearing down these hundreds of homes. And it's making a difference. It's bringing crime down. It's bringing, and the next step is to bring investment in building. And finally, let me tell you a little bit about the program that's made the most impact on our focus on habitual violent felons. I told you we were looking to reduce the number of crimes. Well, the other half of that is we want to now make available detectives, prosecutors, and courts to focus on the habitual violent offenders, a very small percentage of the criminal active population who are responsible for a large percentage of the crime. And the most single successful program, and we're doing it as a policy across, is a rape kit task force that I formed in January 2013. Thanks in part to the media, and we became aware of a huge backlog of rape kits that were untested in the city of Cleveland largely, and some in the suburbs. But it's, the vast majority of the city of Cleveland. We took these rape kits, and we formed a task force, and all the testing is done for and paid for by the Attorney General's office. And Mr. DeWine is then through the Bureau of Criminal Investigation labs. And we are discovering who the rapists are. We're tracking them down, we're finding the victims, and we're prosecuting these cases. Out of the 4,866 cases that we have turned in, we have indicted 440 to date, over 440, And we are tracked for 1,000 by the time we finish. We are 1,000 untested rape kits, 1,000 unsolved rapes we are solving and prosecuting. If there are all the ones we've taken to court, we have a 90% conviction rate. And of the 135 plus convictions so far, 62 serial rapists are there. We are going to bring down hundreds of serial rapists. These men are one-man crime waves. We are going to have a significant impact on the safety of the community. When we look back at the record of these first 440 that we've indicted and the ones we've identified, we look back at their criminal record, we project it out, and we can look at the huge amount of damage they did in this city. And it's unbelievable because these guys could have been prosecuted years ago, and they weren't. It was a mistake. It was a serious mistake. Other prosecutors saw this and never let a backlog grow. In Franklin County, Hamilton County, and counties across the country. Other prosecutors' office did not let this backlog grow to this huge proportion and allow these serial rapists to roam free. 38% of the cases we investigate are done by serial rapists. That's a surprisingly high number. It's an astonishing accomplishment by this task force. We have 40 people working on this, and we're collaborating with the police, BCI, Sheriff's Office to get this done. I've hired approximately 25 seasoned investigators, retirees of police, FBI, and others, brought them in to track these people down, the offenders, and also a half dozen victim advocates where these ladies help with the victims through the process, and administrators on this. And of course, the money for the testing being paid by the AG. We are the nation's model, and the rest of the nation is watching this, who didn't test the rape kits. I'm very proud of this unit. I'm very proud of what we've accomplished. I'm proud of the high spirit my office has, the up in morale, the increases in pay, although slight, we've been able to give them. We've turned into a professional prosecutor's office. It's no longer a political prosecutor's office where raises and promotions have political considerations.
I think, Mr. McGinty, in the interest of time, I think, because that's something we talked about earlier too, I think we'll wrap up here.
Okay, thank you.
And we thank you very much for your time and helping us with our voter education program.